with you. It will de-stress you, it protects against EMF, it gets you into deep sleep states at night, and has other benefits. So when the Fukushima nuclear, quote, accident happened, which I don't necessarily believe that it was an accident, I knew that radiation was going to be coming to the U.S. very quickly, within a few weeks. I knew that because I had already been studying for years the effects of the fallout from Chernobyl and other nuclear accidents and the 2,044 plus atomic bombs that have been dropped around the world or exploded around the world since they were invented. And so I knew there were very highly increased mortality rates all around the world, especially Europe and the area where the fallout was the most dense. But also in the United States, there were mortality rates increased significantly here all across the United States from that fallout from Chernobyl coming over here. So I knew Fukushima appeared to be much worse, and it sounds like it's being confirmed now that it is worse, much worse than Chernobyl. And so I started thinking about what can be done about this, because it's my job to figure out solutions for these threats to our health, natural solutions that really work. And so because of this background I had working with scalar energy technology, first thing I did was I Googled Fukushima scalar energy weapon, and sure enough, the first thing I pulled up was an interview with the Minister of Finance of Japan, on record, on video, saying that the United States had used scalar energy weapons against Japan, not just with Fukushima, but two previous times, trying to create earthquakes to blackmail Japan into economic policies against China that had to do with China's yen becoming the new world reserve currency, which is basically the currency that everybody around the world uses to do business. Right now, the US dollar is primarily used around the world for the reserve currency. So if Germany, for example, wants to buy energy from China, they have to convert their marks into US dollars and then buy it from China. Well, that's changing now, and increasingly countries are starting to use the Chinese yen. And the United States, from what this Minister of Finance in Japan was saying, was trying to slow that or stop that process. And so the first two times that these scalar weapons were used against Japan, they hit West Coast cities, caused earthquakes, and Japan would not relent. And so on the third time, we got Fukushima, according to this interview. And so when I saw that, I was like, wow, that doesn't surprise me at all, because I knew Nikola Tesla had developed earthquake weapons using scalar energy. And so I started looking for solutions, and I figured, well, if somebody's out there creating weapons with this stuff, there's probably somebody out there creating solutions. And in fact, there are. But to my surprise, I found out that there were people creating simple, inexpensive solutions that would do a lot of interesting things, not necessarily neutralize radiation, but do some interesting things with chemtrails. So I'm going to talk about that today. First of all, I'm used to speaking to groups that are not anywhere nearly as sophisticated scientifically as you all here. So I'm used to, first of all, getting over the debate of whether or not chemtrails really exist. So I'm going to gloss over the first probably half of this presentation very, very quickly, because it's normally a 2-hour presentation. We're going to get it done so that we can get to the solutions, because that's what we're really interested in, is what do you do about this stuff, okay? So anyway, if you think that chemtrails and geoengineering are just a conspiracy theory, just go to YouTube and search on David Keith, K-E-I-T-H. David Keith is a Harvard professor, 2009 Time Magazine hero of the environment. And he talks about and has conferences, and other geoengineers have conferences about dumping 10 to 20 million metric tons of these heavy metals and other things into the skies around the globe every year. So if you think it's a conspiracy theory, that's one source that you can go and check. Geoengineers are having public conferences about this stuff. There's nothing secret. There's nothing conspiratorial about it. They have their various reasons for why they say they're doing it. One little interesting tidbit, it actually is against the law to spray chemical or biological agents on human populations. So that's the good news. The bad news is that in that same law, and by the way, this is Public Law 105/85, which is part of the 1998 National Defense Authorization Act, or the NDAA. And in that law, though, it has some prohibitions. It says, the prohibition in subsection A, which is the part that says it's illegal to spray us, does not apply to a test or experiment carried out for any of the following purposes: any peaceful purpose that is related to a medical, therapeutic, pharmaceutical, agricultural, industrial, or research activity, any purpose that is directly related to protection against toxic chemicals or biological weapons and agents, or any law enforcement purpose, including any purpose related to riot control. So basically, it's illegal to spray us, except for anything that corporate government may particularly want us to spray us for. So you and I can't spray each other, but the government can spray us. If you want more facts and details about geoengineering and chemtrail issues, there are several wonderful movies on YouTube for free. I would recommend buying these DVDs so you can support these people, because they are doing this on a shoestring budget, but bringing out the facts about geoengineering and chemtrails. What in the world are they spraying? And why in the world are they spraying? And their website is witwats.com. That's WITWATS.com. Okay? They mentioned these reasons for spraying their geoengineering chemtrail stuff. I'm not going to go over the details. It ranges everything from military to stopping global warming, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, which most of it I think are smoke screens. One of the big reasons it's mentioned in these movies as well, that in my experience, I believe as well, is population reduction. This is an aerial view of geoengineering or chemtrailing, and you can see I'm in Florida. This is the southeastern United States. These trails don't follow any normal commercial aircraft patterns. You would go out of business really quickly if you're flying aircraft backwards and forwards over the same area all the time. So you can see satellite views of these chemtrails in these patterns, and if you sit outside your house or wherever you're at when this is going on, you can watch these planes. And by the way, there are websites that have the transponder tracking for all of these planes going over any area, so you can actually go online and see what aircraft are flying over your area, and you can watch them and you can see their identification, so you can figure out whether or not this is a commercial airliner or not, and you can see what pattern is flying. We want to focus on the solutions. Two technologies that I've been involved with over the years are scalar energy and water fuel. And before I ever did scalar energy, back in the early 90s, I worked with a man named Yul Brown. Yul Brown had developed water fuel technology that was based on a man named William Rhodes' work. And I believe William Rhodes probably got his from Keeley and others back in the 1800s. But water fuel technology has been around since the 1800s. William Rhodes took it and developed it into a welder. I'm not sure if he intentionally did not develop it into a fuel system for vehicles or engines, knowing maybe particularly at that time in the 60s that something might happen to him. But for whatever reason, he did not develop it into a motor fuel or vehicle fuel. He just used it as a fuel for welders. And that company is still, it's under a different name, but you can still buy these water welders in Arizona. So along came Yul Brown in the 60s. And also Andrija Puharich, who were both brilliant men who figured out, I believe, taking William Rhodes' work, developing water fuel technology as well. The story goes that Andrija Puharich was friends with a lot of very high level, very wealthy people, and apparently the Rockefeller family told him not to develop his technology, because he actually developed a water fueled car. But he was warned not to bring it out onto the market, and so he didn't. And so those two technologies didn't get out. In the early 90s, when I worked with Yul Brown, he was attempting to get his technology out onto the market, and I was one of his distributors, and I know he was stopped at every turn, constantly being interrupted with his business and unable to develop the technology and bring it out to market. However, I did witness the technology, this water fuel technology, being used to neutralize radioactive materials with a team of about 50 engineers and scientists and inventors. So I have witnessed this with measurements to show that water fuel technology can neutralize radioactivity. Basically what you do, at least in Brown's gas case, is you run a welder with it, you burn the nuclear material, and it rearranges the atomic particles, possibly subatomic, and changes the radioactive elements into non-radioactive elements. And so I've seen this happen. You can see videos of this on YouTube, not of the neutralizing radioactivity, but you can see Brown's gas welders on there, sublimating tungsten in a few seconds, and all kinds of things that normally welding cannot do. So these water fuels have a 0 point component to them, meaning that in the process of combustion, you are drawing energy in from this scalar energy, actually, in from in between the particles of matter, so to speak. Truly, from everything, in my experience, everything that I've seen, the whole model of atomic structure that we've been taught in school is very incorrect. And so this energy, this scalar energy, is really flowing through everything, kind of like the Force in Star Wars, and you can bring it through subatomic and atomic structures into three-dimensional space-time. What you're really dealing with when you're dealing with scalar energy is multidimensional energy. It's energy that's coming from other dimensions of time and space into 3D space-time. And so until physicists understand and start working with interdimensional physics and mathematics, then they're not really going to get too far with explaining how this stuff works. I know when I was in engineering school, I was taught a lot about imaginary numbers, like square root of -1, right? That can't exist. Well, they do exist in other dimensions of time and space. The mathematics of interdimensional physics is in the realm of imaginary numbers and this weird math that we have not used before for practical purposes. So then along in the 80s came Stanley Meyer. Stanley Meyer, you've probably seen in some of these other presentations, developed a water-powered car. And from what I hear, he was poisoned within a few minutes of signing a $30 million contract with the U.S. military to power their vehicles with this water fuel. So water fuel can neutralize radioactivity. That has been demonstrated on more than one occasion. Scalar energy is a more nebulous thing, and probably Nikola Tesla is probably the most responsible for bringing this type of energy and the awareness of it and technologies using it into the modern era. So where does this stuff come from? How do you generate scalar energy or scalar waves? Well, first of all, it's important to understand that scalar waves are vortex waves. They flow through the universe and they spiral and they branch as they go. So they spiral and they fractal as they go. And so this is just an article from phys.org stating that their black holes are at the centers of galaxies. And so what's been discovered is by Nassim Haramein and others, and if I have more time, normally I present the science behind this and more of the people involved in showing the science of this. But these, at the centers of galaxies and probably at the centers of universes, you have this black hole or singularity that has this spiraling faster than light energy coming out of it from these singularities or black holes. And I believe black holes are probably nothing more than superluminal suns. So they're kind of like an anti-sun where radiation is coming out and going in, sort of like what Nassim Haramein has discussed, where you've got two toroids of energy where they meet, these vortexes are created, where energy is flowing in and out of them. Well, I think that's what the centers of galaxies are. They're where these two toroids of energy are flowing, and it creates this vortex, and energy is flowing into them and energy is flowing out of them. And one of the things that's flowing out of them is superluminal scalar energy. So it comes out of the center of galaxies and it spirals and fractals as it goes, and as it's coming out, it passes through singularities at the centers of suns and at the centers of planets. Nassim Haramein is showing evidence of that our own planet has a singularity at the inside, which would explain a lot of phenomena like gravitation and magnetics and all kinds of things.
First of all, 245. Second of all, could you describe the singularity as the center of our planet?
The singularity at the center of our planet, Nassim Haramein describes it as a mini black hole, about the size maybe of a basketball or so, not a very large one. And so if that's true, he's doing the science and math on that to show. If that's true, it explains a lot of phenomena. And what I have surmised from studying all of this science around it, and also getting knowledge, information from some other sources, this energy is flowing through the galaxy, being relayed to sun to sun to sun, and then also to planets. And it comes, on our planet and other planets, it comes up through the center of the planet, and it's coming down from our sun. And as above, so below, within our own bodies, we have these little black holes inside of our bodies. This is being shown in epigenetics by people like Dr. Bruce Lipton and others. There's a great book called The Genie in Your Genes that has a lot of science and information and people who are involved in this study, looking at the body with electron microscopes and looking at what's going on at the cell level and below. And what's been discovered is you've got these superconducting junctures all along the nervous system, in the brain neural pathways, along the spine you have very large ones, and in the DNA is actually a superconducting antenna. It's a vortexual superconducting antenna. And what makes it superconducting are monoatomic minerals that are actually found in soil, in plants, in water, particularly spring water, and in ocean water and other sources. And so when we ingest these foods that are high in these monoatomic minerals, these monoatomics, what that means, by the way, monoatomic, is that these minerals, normally minerals are metals, and the atoms of them are bound together in some kind of three-dimensional grid pattern. That's what makes a crystal or a metal. You've got these atoms bound together in a three-dimensional grid that gives it its structure. Well, certain elements like the platinum group metals, mercury, silver, copper, gold, they can exist in these monoatomic forms where the individual atoms are not attached to each other. They have a very different charge and spin, and they do not hold on to each other, which is very, very weird in physics. Most physicists would tell you that's impossible because metal atoms always have a very, very strong charge, and they want to hang on to each other very tightly. But in certain processes, we'll turn them into monoatomics, and then they look, instead of looking metallic, they look like white ceramic powders. And there are all kinds of stories throughout our history. In every culture around the world, they've talked and written about this white powder of gold or manna, all of these various things. Egyptians, Aztecs, Mayans, Celts, the Chinese. As a matter of fact, feng shui, a very interesting little tidbit about feng shui, started with the observation that in certain areas the animals and the plants grew bigger and stronger and healthier, and they observed that it was because certain rocks and minerals were present in the soil and in the area. And they would take these rocks and put them into their gardens, and the energy that they would emit would make their plants grow stronger and healthier. So they started arranging them around their gardens, and then they realized they could make certain arrangements where things would grow better. That was the beginning of feng shui. And so they brought them into their households. And so these certain rocks are very high in these monoatomics, like basalt, for example. Volcanic rocks are very high in these monoatomics. And so this energy that's flowing through the cosmos is fractaling. It gets to our planet and it passes through this singularity at the center of the planet. When it passes down to us from above, from the sun and other suns and the cosmic radiation that's coming down to the planet, it goes into, first of all, from the center of the earth, it passes through the soil and the crystals and the rock in the earth. And as it turns out, rock and crystal have these monoatomics hiding in them. These monoatomic minerals are not normal 3D matter. They're really, what they really are is multidimensional matter, where they're kind of like a little iceberg, where the tip of the iceberg exists in 3D space-time, but the majority of it exists outside of 3D space-time simultaneously in other dimensions of time and space. And so that allows this scalar energy in other dimensions of time and space to flow into 3D, into this three-dimensional reality. And so within soil, these energies flowing up from the center of the earth pass through these crystals. These monoatomic elements are hiding inside of these crystals, and crystals are oscillators. They will take the frequencies that are coming through them and change them into other frequencies. So you get this filtration process that's energy coming up through the ground, being filtered through crystals, changing the oscillating frequencies of it, and some of them are very harmonious to living organisms, some are less so, and some are actually not very good for living organisms. And that's where you run into these places of geopathic stress, where some places are not particularly conducive to living organisms, and they don't thrive there, whereas other places they thrive more. It's this concentration of these monoatomics in the soil, in the crystals, in the rocks, coming up through the ground. So these, in our soil, we have microbes living in soil that eat these rocks, break them down into small angstrom size and monatomic size particles that plants can uptake and also fungus can uptake through their roots. And so when you ingest those, that's one way that you bring them into the body. Now those microbes also that are breaking down these elements into angstrom and monoatomics in the soil, when rain comes down from above, washes through the soil, it will wash these angstrom and monoatomic minerals down into water aquifers. Now one of the characteristics of a superconductor is it's anti-gravitational. It actually wants to push away from the center of the Earth, which makes sense if there's a singularity down there. And so these monoatomics in water are wanting to push up to the surface and levitate up to the surface, but the soil holds them down. So as rainwater and groundwater washes them down, they collect in aquifers, and when they've accumulated enough, they will levitate up to the surface through aquifers to spring heads. And so therefore spring water is typically very high in these monoatomics. And very often these waters that come to the surface are actually not brought up by hydrostatic pressure, they are actually levitated up. If you look at the dynamics of mountains, for example, on say a 13,000 foot high mountain in the Himalayas, how does water get to the top of a 13,000 foot high mountain? It's not being pumped up, it's not being pushed up, it's being levitated up. And that's why these yogis and shamans and gurus tend to live in these mountains drinking high Ormus water, monoatomic element water, and eating monoatomic element food that's grown in these soils that are high in these. Also, volcanoes are very high in these monoatomics. I'm going to skip this. Well, no, I'm not going to skip. I'll leave this. So anyway, these monoatomics, they're in soil, they get into the food, they get into the plants, you ingest them, they plug into your body, they plug into the acupuncture meridians, what the Chinese call the acupuncture meridians. They're just superconducting junctures of these monoatomic minerals. Same thing with the DNA, brain neural pathways. Along the spine, you have large concentrations of them, large nodes of them. That's what correspond to what people call the chakras. And if you look at these ancient practices that talk about this stuff, like Ayurveda, Chinese medicine, they talk about the vortexes of energy coming out of the chakras. Well, it's because it's scalar waves. It's scalar waves that are vortexing outward. And the farther away they are from the brain, the different the frequency is. The brain is actually a scalar wave generator. The brain is very high in these monoatomics. One of the things that I found in creating scalar waves with electronic circuits is one of the ways you can create them is by creating electric fields that intersect at perpendicular lines, and you will create scalar waves. That's exactly what the brain does. That's how you create your reality. You've got a right and a left brain hemisphere out of this organic material that's loaded up with these superconducting minerals. You've got a lot of folds all over the brain that increase the surface area. They create these intersecting electric and electromagnetic fields that create scalar waves. And these scalar waves are the thought forms that you generate that go out into the quantum field, and if they have enough duration and intensity, they will slow down and coagulate into matter and the conventional electromagnetic energy that we can measure and that we typically talk about. So your own biology, your own organic biology is some of the most sophisticated technology in the universe that generates scalar waves. We're all walking, talking scalar wave generators, and that's how we create our reality. All consciousness is doing this. It's creating these scalar waves that, if they have enough duration and intensity, they slow down and manifest as matter and energy that we can see and measure in 3D. So, with that said, you've also got these energies coming down from the sun and from space, from all these other planetary bodies and from suns. Comes down through the Earth's atmosphere, hits the surface of the Earth, it bounces back up, hits the ionosphere of the Earth, it's reflected back down, and it just continually bounces back and forth between the Earth and the ionosphere over and over again, back and forth, 24/7. That's known as the Schumann resonance. It was named after the man who discovered it, Schumann, in the 50s, I believe it was. And so this pulsing, there are several different frequencies that occur, with different types of energy coming down and doing this. And there's a primary pulse that is around 7.83 cycles per second, or 7.83 hertz. And that primary Schumann resonance is a pulse that our brains and our nervous systems and our cells entrain with, and slows us down and gets us into deep sleep states at night, and it de-stresses us and it keeps us balanced and happy and healthy. Problem is, the Schumann resonance has been accelerating for years, and it's now up to about 13 something. So instead of listening to this slow, relaxing beat in our bodies and our cells and our brains, we're listening to disco all the time. And it's wearing us out. Because disco's fun, but you can't do it 24/7, right? So we're getting stressed at a subtle level by this Schumann resonance that's accelerated. And we've got to do something about it. So yes?
Why is the Schumann resonance accelerating?
Why is the Schumann resonance accelerating? That's a good question. There's all kinds of theories about it. The one that I adhere to and believe the most is man-made EMF on the planet, from everything from the electric grid to everything that we make electronic and electrical, all of those fields that we're putting off. They're somewhere between, I've heard, 500 million and 1 billion times above natural EMF on the planet, and so it's probably these disharmonious electromagnetic frequencies that we're generating on the planet. It may be coming from the cosmos. Some people say that it's a natural increase in the cycles of the universe, and that may be the case too. But for whatever reason, it's accelerating, and it's not doing good things for us. Some people think that this faster Schumann resonance is expanding consciousness and waking people up. Well, it may be, because it may be making them uncomfortable. But I can tell you, after creating devices that pulse at the old Schumann resonance, they majorly de-stress people and get them into deep sleep states. And they have all kinds of interesting effects on plants and animals and microbes, which we'll get into in a moment. So we've got this ocean of scalar energy that flies through the universe like matter's not even there. It's really interdimensional energy that goes way beyond the speed of light, or what we've been told is the speed of light, because now it's been discovered that there is no the speed of light. The speed of light can change depending on circumstances. And so, and of course now, like with the Hadron Collider, they've discovered there are particles that go way beyond the speed of light. So we've got these waves of energy that can travel in between the, quote, particles of matter, going way beyond the speed of light, and it's what ultimately slows down and turns into matter and energy that we can see. As I mentioned before, crystals have these monoatomic elements in them. They're kind of like lenses or antennas for this energy that's all around us, and they can bring it into 3D. And they do normally. That's what they always do. Not many people have stopped to measure scalar fields coming off of crystals, because apparently the technology has not been available to do that until recently, and it's pretty much in the hands of secret government labs and a few very smart people as to how to do that. But at any rate, you know, when you see body workers and healers working with crystals and channeling energy through them, it's not a bunch of New Age nonsense. What they're doing is using their scalar wave generator that God gave them up in their skull, channeling it through the nervous system, out through the hands, and they hold these crystals, which are scalar energy oscillators, and it will alter the frequency of the energy coming through that they're generating and send it out in a certain frequency corresponding to that type of crystal. And if it's the right crystal, it's a healing frequency. And so that's how crystals can help heal people. You know, if you think that this is a bunch of New Age nonsense, I would recommend to go online and Google MIT OpenCourseware, and you will find MIT has their entire curriculum online on video for free, and you can go and take some crystallography courses, and you can see that there are heavy-duty scientists that study crystallography and the effects of them. You start studying that stuff, you'll realize that it's not a bunch of New Age nonsense. The human body has, as I mentioned, this field. Well, the scalar energy is flowing in it and flowing out of it. It's what the Chinese call qi. You know, in Ayurveda and Chinese medicine, these other ancient practices, they talk about the flow of qi or the blockage of qi or prana or life force or whatever. It is this scalar energy of consciousness that flows through the universe. I liken it to God consciousness, and it comes in, flows in through you. You're also generating it. And it creates this, guess what, a torus-shaped field around you. You have a torus-shaped field around you of scalar energy. So does the Earth. The Earth has a torus-shaped field around it. So does the Sun. So does the solar system. So does the galaxy. This is what Nassim Haramein talks about when he talks about boundaries. You've got this torus-shaped field of energy being generated by a recurring geometry in the universe. And so this toroidal field of energy is created through this flow coming through the cosmos. And it flows down, gets to us, we create a field. Every cell in your body has, guess what, a torus-shaped field. The atoms in your body have a torus-shaped field. The subatomic particles have a torus-shaped field. It goes on ad infinitum. So that's all nice. And we'll get to in a moment, what can you do with it? So what, right? This is all nice and interesting, but what can you do with it? I don't know if we can play this video very quickly. Can we play this video? We won't worry about it. Normally, this is just like a 10-second video showing the difference between transverse waves and longitudinal waves. Scalar waves are longitudinal. They're kind of like a pressure wave. You can... Oh, it's playing? Oh, okay, let's play. Okay, so you can see up top, a regular wave, transverse wave goes up and down. Actually, it goes around and around. But a longitudinal wave is like a pressure wave. It's like a compression in a slinky, whereas a transverse wave, the conventional waves that we measure and talk about in physics, it's an oscillating wave that goes up, actually goes around. I was taught in engineering school that electricity flows through conductors up and down in waves like this because we look at these waves through oscilloscopes and things that are two-dimensional. But in fact, the energy is flowing like this, and it's fractaling as it goes through the conductor. And so a lot of waves, by the way, that we see on Earth would normally be vortexing rather than going up and down if they weren't glued down to the planet. For example, ocean waves. The only reason that they go up and down like that as opposed to around like that is because gravity is smashing them down onto a two-dimensional plane. This is a video about a cymatics experiment. I just want to show, if we can play this and just skip, maybe a couple of places in. I just want to show some examples. They take a sheet of metal, put a tone generator underneath it, and dial through frequencies of sound. And when you hit certain frequencies of sound, you get geometric patterns. And the higher frequencies that you go, the more and more elaborate the pattern gets. So jump ahead some now. Okay. Well, we'll just let it run just a touch, and then we'll go to the next one. So as it goes along, it gets more and more complex. And some of these pictures you'll notice are taught in calculus. They're, you can graph these in calculus. So all of these, you go from chaos into order. And when you hit certain frequencies, you go into order and you get a geometric pattern. And it just so happens that all of those frequencies where it hits order are frequencies that are harmonious to living organisms. So if you're playing with energy in any form and you want to know what frequencies correspond to healing energies or healthy energies that are beneficial to living organisms, just take a note from cymatics and see what frequencies correspond to organization as opposed to chaos. Okay? There's a wonderful book written by Ilya Prigogine called Order Out of Chaos, where he discusses this. He was a Nobel Prize winning physicist who figured out a lot of things about cymatics.
I have a quick question on that. On the different frequencies, does it change the order each time, or are you always doing the same image?
That's a good question. Do you get different patterns from the same frequencies if you do this experiment over and over? No, you get the same geometric patterns with these same frequencies if you do it over and over, or if you repeat it with the same materials. It might change if you're using different materials, but if you took a sheet of metal, a tone generator, and you dumped sand on it, and everything's pretty much the same, you can repeat the process over and over again, and it will lock into the same geometric patterns at the same frequencies over and over again. So it is repeatable, and that's why there are people that are doing healing work who talk a lot about these sacred frequencies, like the love healing frequency or the DNA healing frequency, 528 and 582 and 432 and 444 and 741, 936. You'll see a lot of that. It sounds like a bunch of New Age nonsense if you don't understand cymatics. But if you understand cymatics, you could be using sound, you could be using scalar waves, you could be using magnetics, electric fields, all kinds of stuff. And if you get the right frequencies and you're using a frequency that will work specifically for certain types of issues, you get amazing results with it. Okay. Now, as I mentioned, these scalar waves flowing through the cosmos, they're vortexing and spiraling and fractaling, and they come down to Earth. They come up through the Earth. Mountains, particularly volcanic mountains, are natural scalar wave transceivers. So volcanoes are high in, volcanic rock is high in these monoatomic elements. You can go onto YouTube and search on Iceland volcano lightning, and you can see, or just search on volcano lightning, and you will see lightning bolts shooting up out of volcanoes when they're erupting. And of course, scientists don't know why that is. Well, it's because those volcanoes are emitting a lot of monoatomic elements, which are superconductors. They create what's called a Meissner field, which is a superconducting field, and it wants to ground out. And so it starts shooting large amounts of electricity out. And so mountains that are high in volcanic rock, extinct volcanoes, they're going to be high in these monoatomic elements locked into the rock, and therefore they will create scalar vortexes shooting up out of them that will go up into space. And if sometimes you can see evidence of that with, for example, lenticular clouds. This is over Mount Shasta, and I had a friend come back from Mount Shasta, and she was a yoga teacher, said, "Oh my God, there's flying saucers over Mount Shasta." And it wasn't flying saucers, although maybe there was a flying saucer hiding in there, but it's the scalar vortexes that are coming off of these mountains that slice these clouds up into these disc shapes, and that's what you're seeing a manifestation of. Okay, so you can make an artificial mountain, and that's what people have been doing for thousands of years. One way is to take rock that is high in these monoatomic elements, that's either high in volcanic rock, or in this case with these pyramids, it's sedimentary rock that where volcanic rock was broken down and deposited and turned into stone, so it's still high in these monoatomics, and you build a pyramid out of it. And what you've got is an artificial mountain that is a scalar wave transceiver. So these energies that are flowing in from the sun and up from the surface, up from the center of the earth, they meet inside of these pyramids, and they create scalar wave vortexes in large areas around them. And depending on the geometry of the pyramid, you can tune them to pick up certain frequencies and transmit certain frequencies, depending on the dimensions and on the materials that are made of. So our illustrious government wound up studying this and understanding this, and developed another method of doing it with antennas, for example, the HARP antenna, and using powered scalar wave generators to transmit very large amounts of scalar energy for various purposes. It can be used to modify weather. One of the things that these scalar waves do is they will knock ionized particles out of the atmosphere. They have all kinds of interesting effects that we don't have time to get into. But when you do that, you can bombard areas with harmonious frequencies or non-harmonious frequencies. And if you do the right things with non-harmonious frequencies, you can do things like project it onto a battlefield and scramble the brains of soldiers so they don't even know who they are and why they're there. All sorts of stuff. You can suppress immune systems, you can make people sick, you can dumb people down, all sorts of things. So you can do all kinds of positive things with it too, yes. It just depends on the frequency. It really depends on the frequency and the power behind it. So absolutely, it's like any tool, you know. You can use it for good, you can use it for harm. One of the signatures that you can see in the atmosphere when this is going on is, as I mentioned, you saw the natural forms with lenticular clouds. Well, unnatural forms from these HARP antennas and others will show up as longitudinal congruent lines, because these are longitudinal waves. They will show up in the cloud structures as longitudinal lines like this. And those are typical classic scalar wave signatures in the clouds. And it gets much more uniform and much broader than this. I've actually flown in areas where, as far as the eye could see, probably 150 miles each direction over entire states, there were congruent, perfectly parallel lines of clouds that looked like somebody had taken a plow and plowed through the clouds. There were clear areas, clear lines and lines of these clouds. Classic scalar wave signatures in the cloud. So if you see this in the clouds above, you can rest your, you can be sure that the area is being bombarded with some kind of scalar energy.
Visible from the ground?
What's that?
This plowing effect visible?
Absolutely, it's visible from the ground. Yeah, this is taken from the ground. You can see it everywhere. It's in the clouds above you, and quite often I will see this in areas that where you will see these kinds of wave patterns. Yes?
I'm curious if you've been approached with an argument by fluid dynamicists, for instance, about those forming
It can happen naturally. It can happen naturally, but not with the frequency that it's occurring. It's like everywhere. It's so ridiculous. You know, it's not going to happen with that much frequency. Another signature that you can see also with scalar wave bombardment is fractal patterns in the clouds. And I'm old enough to, I've been around 52 years, so I'm old enough to remember back in the 60s and 70s, I don't recall ever seeing any of these kinds of cloud patterns, okay? Maybe I was a little kid and I wasn't...
That's what it looked like over Denver this morning.
Right. When we flew into Denver, there were tons of scalar wave patterns over Denver, and also a lot of chemtrailing going on as well. And it used to look like that where I live. Here's another aerial view, a satellite view of two scalar wave patterns. You used to be able to see these patterns on Google Maps and Google Earth, but they started photoshopping them out because there are other types of transmitters that will create these. It's not just scalar energy. X-band microwaves and other things will do it.
Could you read the frequency by those clouds?
Can you read the frequency by looking at the clouds? If you're smart, you probably could. I've never tried that.
Could you determine the frequency?
I don't know. You probably could determine the frequency by looking at the clouds. Yeah, I would suspect somebody smart could do that. I don't consider myself that smart. Or actually, I'm too lazy. But there's probably somebody out there that does.
Related to wavelengths, so
Right.
probably calculate.
Right. Yeah, I would imagine you could. Okay, so here we go. Solutions. What are the solutions? Well, as I said, I started studying this, and Alexander Golod is a Russian physicist. He was studying, after the Cold War ended, he had a large budget. He worked for the Russian government, and he had millions of dollars at his disposal, and he didn't need to spend it on weapons to destroy the United States anymore, and so he started experimenting with pyramids. And so he built a lot of pyramids doing different things with them, quite interesting things. And his work is very, very interesting. He built a large 144-foot high pyramid outside of Moscow and discovered all kinds of benefits that came from this. This is known as a phi ratio pyramid, so you can see it's taller and more slender than the Egyptian pyramids. Completely made out of fiberglass and plastic, no metal conductors whatsoever, because when you're dealing with scalar energy, it's like bizarro world physics. Electrical conductors are non-conductors with scalar energy, and non-conducting electrical non-conductors are scalar energy conductors. So he built it entirely out of fiberglass and plastic. It will do all kinds of interesting things, including healing people. You can charge crystals with it, take them to people, and it will heal them. It will neutralize radioactivity. It will clear a huge area, 300 kilometers in diameter area of radioactivity in the air and pollutants, so it'll clean up the air. Golod figured out with his multi-million-dollar budget that what these things are doing is they are not dropping this stuff to the ground, they are vortexing it up into space. It's very cool. There's the inside of one of his pyramids with people sitting in there hoping to get healed. There's the inside of it going up. Okay. Now, this one was very, very interesting. There's a whole slew of benefits that came out of this pyramid. One that was very, very interesting to me, and I talk about this a lot in my longer talks. When you understand how this scalar energy flows through the cosmos and what its involvement with consciousness is, the polarities of energy that create and manifest as problems in our reality, the opposite polarities always manifest a solution simultaneously. So if you understand that, all you've got to do is start looking around for the solutions and you'll find them. One of the things that this pyramid did was it brought back extinct species of flowers, extinct on Earth for 11 million years. Okay, Golod theorized that what it's doing is it's bringing in the old patterns of these ancient organisms from the quantum field, or what some people might call the Akashic records.
Did they just start growing in the pyramid?
They started growing in the field around the pyramid, yes. Now, other people that have neutralized nuclear radiation, there's been tons of them. Radha Roy in 1975, who was a professor emeritus of physics at Arizona State University, developed a method, and that went nowhere. He's dead now. Thomas Bearden, of course, he's got an application, a patent application for it. Patrick Flanagan, Stanley Myers Technology, and others. If you want to do this yourself, there are ways to create these devices very inexpensively with a few things from home centers and eBay. You can create your own devices that will clear these chemtrails and these nuclear particles out of the sky. by doing the same thing, making an imitation mountain, a little imitation mountain that will vortex scalar energy up in the atmosphere and send it out into space if it's strong enough, okay? Konstantin Meil is a German physicist who has taken Tesla's technology. He's a brilliant, brilliant man. Figured out a lot of stuff like the unified field equation. He finally solved it. But he's got a scalar wave generator kit that you can buy for $2,000, $3,000 if you want to really. It really doesn't cost that much money. But if you just want to dive in, he's the man to look at for circuits that will generate scalar waves. So you could take something like this, point it up at the sky, and you could clear the sky of these things. Particularly if you pulse it at certain frequencies like the Schumann resonance. Okay, so I wound up developing a device a couple years ago. It took me 1.5 years after Fukushima to get it done, and I wound up putting it in my backyard. It's a power device. Actually, we sell on my website a little pyramid device that puts out scalar waves to get you into deep sleep state. It's basically a whole bunch of those in one package that's much stronger. And it will create a vortex of scalar energy that goes up in the atmosphere. This is what my backyard looked like in the sky before I put this device out. I call it the sky shield. There it is. You can see these scalar patterns and these unusual kind of wispy clouds. More scalar patterns. And you can see the chemtrails or contrails, if you want to call them that. I call them chemtrails. This is what it looked like the next day after putting this out, this scalar wave generator out. Clear sky, puffy white clouds, blue sky, no haze, no fractal patterns, no scalar wave patterns, just blue sky and puffy white clouds. And over time what happened was, and by the way, this is the event horizon, which is about 75 miles out. And this device is about this big. It's about yay big. And it will generate a vortex about 75-mile radius. And you can see back in the distance those puffy white clouds. That's where the event horizon of this thing ends. And you can see the haze and the chemtrails in the sky outside of it. I'll give you a closer view. So you can see haze and wispy clouds and chemtrails. And all of a sudden, boom, it stops. And there's puffy white clouds and blue sky. You can do this, too, with static devices. There's a material called orgonite that a man named Carl Hans Wells developed, and it's really ridiculously simple. You take some kind of non-conducting resin like fiberglass. Fiberglass resin is a good one because it's widely available. It's really toxic and stinky and nasty to work with, but it's widely available and it's inexpensive. Get a 2-gallon bucket, dump some crystals into it, dump some metal powders or metal granules into it, put some crystals in it arranged in a certain way, and you have a static device that will generate these scalar vortexes. You stick it out in your yard, and it will clear chemtrails. If you design it right, it will clear chemtrails for about a 30-mile diameter. There's a man named Don Croft who developed something called a cloud buster, which you can Google that, and you can see tons of people making these devices. That is kind of I would say it's a less efficient design because it takes more materials and effort to build it, but that's a cloud buster on the right. These little pyramids here are simply, the way I discovered this actually when I was working on this, I had my manufacturing guy had put some of these little pyramids for our rest shield devices out on the picnic table outside to let them cure in the sun, and I was mowing the grass and I saw these chemtrails being laid, and they were like vortexing and dissolving. And it was the most bizarre thing. I was like, what the heck? And so when I got back to the house, I saw that and went, hey, I wonder if that's what's doing it. So I drove around town, and it seemed to be clearing an area about 5 miles diameter. So I put 7 of them out there and drove around, and then it went out to about a 50-mile diameter. So that was the beginning of figuring out this stuff. If you design orgonite properly, it does work. It will clear these things. And if you design it properly and create these vortexes, it won't drop the stuff back onto the ground. It will send it back up. It'll send it out into space and at least not drop it back down onto us. It also has a lot of side benefits. Plants grow stronger and healthier and bigger. Honeybees and pollinators and insects will come back around, and it strengthens animals in the area. I'm in Florida. It reduces the mosquito population around where I'm at. It does all kinds of interesting things because it's using natural stones that have natural frequencies built into it that are harmonious to living organisms. These are a couple of devices I made. These are just static devices that will clear about a 30-mile diameter. Yes?
Is there a website where I can discover the appropriate specifications application?
Is there a website? Right now, is there a website to discover how to build these things? Right now, go online and Google Chemtrail Busters or Chembusters and go to YouTube, and you can see people making them and showing how to make them. My advice is, if you're watching those, they're regurgitating a couple of people's techniques, so I would say the trick is to use very small particle sizes of metals and of crystals, and so use powdered crystals and volcanic rocks. There's a really wonderful book called The Enlivened Rock Powders by Harvey Lyle, if you want to know like what rock powders you can use. And use those instructions, very fine particle sizes, and then some macro crystals in them, and play around with it. And yeah, there are a bunch of people that are doing this that can show you how to do it. I, at some point, will have some videos or something about how to do it, because I've got a million people wanting me to teach how to do this. Oh, The Enlivened Rock Powders by Harvey Lyle. I'm out of time, so I can't talk about the body, but I will be having about regenerating cells out of the body. I've helped people that have had patients heal it completely. Was a quadriplegic, and she's fine after a year of rebuilding the cells. So stuff, you can regenerate the body, and you can heal living foods and detoxification. So, my website is freshandalive.com. My name is Ken Rohla. I'm the dark horse. Everybody knows heard of me. I like it that way. We already get 2 emails a day. I can't take it anymore. There's my information. My website is freshandalive.com. My blog is beyondrawfood.com. And I'm on Facebook. And Facebook is probably the best place to see my updates, because I don't have time to blog, but I'm always goofing on Facebook. So I'm either out there reposting stuff or cracking jokes. So take your pick.
Did you put a pyramid out here today? Because I saw some Chemtrail this morning.
Well, actually, I do have this. This is my rest shield device for sleep. So I have this in my room, and it will have an effect to a certain degree outside. But this is mainly for sleep and protection against EMF. So,
Is there a known device to measure these scalar waves?
there are devices. Constantine Mile is probably the best person to look at for devices that can measure scalar waves, but it's a new frontier, and up to this point, it's mostly been secret government labs that have been able to measure them. I know, for example, Gala, he was using some top secret Russian radar technology to measure his pyramid, and they would not let him know how it worked. So I am out of time. One more question and I'm gone.
Do you follow Dutch Sense's work, watching scalar squares and scalar circles?
Do I what?
Have you seen Dutch Sense's work
No.
online? Okay. And are you familiar with Judy Wood?
Yes. Yes. The question was, am I familiar with Judy Wood and this other guy's scalar technology? I'm familiar with Judy Wood and not the other person, but yes. The United States government is very well aware of this. They have scalar energy weapons. This is one of their biggest secrets. I have a friend actually who was a medical doctor that wrote a book about the dangers of breast implants, and she had an assassination attempt against her several times using high frequency microwave weapons. So it can simulate natural causes of death, and so it makes you look like you've had a heart attack or something like that. Because I've already been threatened, I have taken all of the details of how to build this technology that I have, and I have given it to people so that it will be massively disseminated if anything happens to me. So if anything happens to me, this stuff is going global, because I've been very fortunate to meet people who in very high levels of power and influence that can get this stuff out if anything happens to me.
Are your slides available online?
Are my slides available online? No, but I will be having I'll have probably DVDs and more information out about this kind of stuff, and also I'll be talking around the world. And there's a bunch of interviews with me online talking about this stuff as well. So if you just Google my name, you'll find me.
Are you going to do a workshop in Denver anytime?
Am I going to do a workshop in Denver anytime? I will go wherever people want me to come. If just call me and we'll work it out. Yeah, I go where I'm asked to go. So yes, I'll go wherever you want me to if we can work it out. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And now we're going to have a short break before reconvening again at 3:45 for Zero Fossil Fuel. Mark Brash. So enjoy a little break, and we'll come back.